If you're over 40 and you've got less than $50,000 saved, I need you to do one thing before you close this video out of embarrassment. Just breathe. Because in the next few minutes, I'm going to hand you a number that might change how you feel about your entire financial life. Right now, somewhere in your head, there's a voice telling you it's too late, that you missed the window, that everyone else figured this out years ago, and somehow you're the one who fell behind. I want you to sit with that voice for a second, because I used to hear it too. And here's the thing nobody tells you. That voice is lying to you. Not in some motivational poster way, in a numbers way. Stay with me. What I'm about to show you isn't a pep talk. It's math. And math doesn't care how old you are. So before we go anywhere else, I want to ask you something honest. Not for me. For you. How much of that $50,000 number is actually about money? And how much of it is about shame? Hold on to that answer. We're going to need it. Here's what almost nobody over 40 gets told. Not by their bank, not by their brother-in-law who made a killing in some stock, not by the finance guys on television who talk like everyone started investing in the womb. Compound interest is not a young person's game. It never was. It's a patient person's game. And patience doesn't have an age limit. Let me show you what I mean. Because I think you deserve the actual numbers, not another vague promise. Picture two people. Call them James and Robert. Just for the story. James starts investing at 25, puts in $200 a month. Nothing dramatic. He does this for 15 years, then stops completely, never adds another dollar. Just lets it sit and grow until he's 65. Robert, on the other hand, does nothing until he's 45. Then he wakes up. He starts putting in that same $200 a month. But he doesn't stop at 15 years. He keeps going, all the way to 65. 20 years of contributions instead of 15. Now, on paper, you'd think James wins easily. He had that magical head start. Everybody always talks about the head start like it's the whole game, but here's what actually happens when you run the numbers at a reasonable average return. Robert's account, by 65, isn't some sad, distant runner-up. It's close. Sometimes it's even ahead, depending on the return rate and how consistent he stays. Because the thing that actually builds wealth isn't just time in the market from birth. It's time in the market combined with how much you're willing to put in and how long you refuse to quit. I'm not telling you this to make you feel like you didn't miss anything. You did miss something. 15, 20 years is real. I'm not going to stand here and pretend it isn't. What I'm telling you is this. The story you've been told. That if you didn't start at 22, you're basically done. That story is a sales pitch. It's designed to make young people feel urgent enough to open an account, and it accidentally convinces people your age that the game is over. It isn't a lie built for you. It's a lie that just happens to land on you sideways. Think about your own life for a second. Think about the version of you at 25. Did that person have the income you have now? The discipline? The clarity about what actually matters? Probably not. I know mine didn't. At 25, I was making decisions with almost no information. I didn't know what a Roth IRA was. I didn't understand the difference between saving and investing. Nobody sat me down and explained any of it. I was busy trying to survive my 20s, not build a spreadsheet. You, right now, at 40, 45, 50, You have something that 25-year-old version of yourself never had. You have judgment. You have income that's probably higher than it was back then. You have the scar tissue from mistakes you already made, which means you're less likely to make them again. That's not nothing. That's actually the ingredient that matters most. Here's a metaphor I want you to hold on to, because I think it explains this better than any spreadsheet could. Growing money isn't like planting a tree, where the only thing that matters is how many years ago you put the seed in the ground. It's more like tending a garden you inherited halfway through the season. Yes, you missed spring, but summer still grows things. The soil doesn't know or care what month you showed up. It only cares whether you show up now and whether you keep showing up. The gardener who arrives in July and waters every single day will outproduce the one who planted in April and then walked away. I want you to notice something about James and Robert's story. James, remember, stopped contributing after 15 years. He let his money coast for the next 30. That's actually the biggest mistake in that whole story. Not that he started early, but that he stopped. Starting early doesn't save you if you quit, and starting late doesn't doom you if you don't. So if you're sitting here at 42, or 48, or 53, feeling like you're standing at the bottom of a mountain everyone else already climbed, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not at the bottom of the same mountain. You're standing at the base of a different one. Shorter in some ways, steeper in others, but climbable, absolutely climbable. The only way you actually lose this game is by deciding right now, in this moment, that it's already lost. That's the only move that guarantees the outcome you're afraid of. Everything else, every dollar you put in starting today, every account you finally open, every bad habit you finally break, all of that still counts. It still compounds. It still matters. I know that might feel too simple to be true, like there has to be a catch. There isn't one. The catch was never your age. The catch was always whether you'd start. And maybe that's the real reframe here. It's not too late, like some bumper sticker. Something quieter than that. Something closer to the truth. The mountain changed shape when you turned 40. It didn't disappear. Now I want to talk about the 3 mistakes, because knowing the mountain is climbable doesn't matter much if you keep tripping over the same rocks on the way up. And I've watched people your age, smart people, capable people, trip over these same 3 rocks over and over. The first mistake is panic that turns into paralysis. Here's how it usually shows up. Someone finally looks at their retirement account. Really looks. Maybe it's a birthday that does it. Maybe it's a friend mentioning their own number at dinner, and something in your stomach drops. And in that moment, the fear is so big, so immediate, that the only thing your brain wants to do is close the tab. Not deal with it today. Deal with it soon. And soon becomes next month. Next month becomes next year. I understand this one intimately, because fear doesn't actually feel like fear in the moment. It feels like being busy. It feels like, I'll get to it after the holidays. It feels like 1,000 reasonable-sounding excuses that are really just fear wearing a disguise. The problem with paralysis isn't that it's dramatic, it's that it's quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It just costs you another year, and then another, each one just as invisible as the last, until suddenly a decade is gone and nothing changed. The second mistake is the opposite instinct, and it's the one that actually worries me more, because it looks like action. It feels like doing something. This is the person who realizes they're behind and decides the only way to catch up is to swing big. Suddenly, they're pulling money into some volatile stock a coworker mentioned, or a crypto coin with a name that sounds like a joke, or an option strategy some stranger on the internet swore turned his account into a fortune in 6 months. I get the emotional logic behind it. If regular investing feels too slow to fix a 20-year gap, then something faster feels like the answer. But here's what actually happens more often than not. Big risk doesn't just carry the chance of a bigger win, it carries the chance of losing what you already have. And at this stage of life, the math is brutal in a specific way. You have far less time to recover from a serious loss than you did at 25. A 30% drop when you're 28 is a bad year. A 30% drop when you're 52, right before you needed that money, can undo everything. Chasing speed at this age isn't ambition. It's often just panic, dressed up as a strategy. The third mistake is the quietest one, and honestly, the one I think causes the most damage over a lifetime. It's ignoring the problem out of shame. This is different from paralysis. Paralysis is, I know it's bad, I just can't look at it. Shame is deeper than that. Shame says, if I look at it, it means something about who I am. It turns a math problem into an identity problem. And once your net worth becomes tangled up with your self-worth, you stop being able to think clearly about either one. I've talked to people who avoided opening a single retirement statement for years. Not because they were lazy, because somewhere along the way, they decided that their bank balance was a verdict on their character. And who wants to keep reading a verdict that says you failed? Here's what I need you to separate. Right now, tonight, whenever you're hearing this. Your savings account is not a report card on your worth as a person. It's just a number. It reflects decisions, circumstances, luck, timing, 100 things that were sometimes in your control and sometimes weren't. It does not reflect your value as a father, a mother, a partner, a human being trying to make it through an expensive world. The moment you can separate those two things, the money and the shame, is the exact moment you become capable of fixing the money. Not before. So if you recognize yourself in any of these three, the freeze, the wild swing for the fences, the quiet avoidance, I want you to hear this clearly. None of that makes you foolish. It makes you human, reacting to fear in one of the 3 ways fear usually shows up. The difference between the people who turn this around and the people who don't isn't intelligence. It's whether they catch themselves doing one of these 3 things and choose, on purpose, to do something different instead. That's what we're building next. One more thing before we move on. These 3 mistakes rarely show up alone. Usually it's a cycle. You avoid the number out of shame for a while. Then one day the shame gets loud enough that you panic. And in that panic, instead of taking one small, boring, sensible step, you reach for something dramatic. Because dramatic feels like it matches the size of the fear. Small and boring is not the enemy here. Small and boring, done consistently, is exactly what wins this. Understanding that, really understanding it, not just nodding along, is what separates the next 20 years from the last 20. So let's talk about the next 12 months. Not the next 30 years, just 12 months. Because 30 years is too big to hold in your hands, and 12 months is something you can actually grab onto. Here's the plan. Not a fantasy plan. A realistic one, built for someone who has bills and a mortgage or rent, and maybe kids who need things, and a life that doesn't pause just because you decided to get serious about money. Step 1. Figure out what you can actually save as a percentage of what comes in, not what a finance influencer saves, not what your neighbor claims he saves. You. A common starting target you'll hear thrown around is somewhere around 15% of income going toward retirement. I want to be honest with you. If you're behind, 15% might feel impossible right now, and that's okay. The number that matters more than any specific percentage is this one. Whatever you're saving today, is it more than you were saving last year? That direction, upward, consistently, matters more than hitting some perfect figure overnight. Start where you actually are. 5%, 8%. Whatever is true and sustainable. Then, every time you get a raise, instead of letting your whole lifestyle expand to match it, send half of that raise towards savings before you ever see it in your checking account. That one habit, done for a few years straight, quietly rebuilds a retirement account faster than almost anything else. Step 2. Decide where your money goes first. Debt or investing. And this isn't a coin flip. It's math with one clear answer most of the time. If you're carrying high-interest debt, credit cards especially, sitting at 20-25% interest, that debt is actively working against you faster than almost any investment can work for you. Paying that down isn't the boring choice instead of investing. Paying that down is investing. A guaranteed 22% return, which is what you get by eliminating a 22% interest rate, doesn't exist anywhere else in the financial world. Not in stocks, not in real estate, nowhere. So the order looks like this, generally speaking. First, a small emergency cushion, even just $1,000, so a car repair doesn't send you back into credit card debt. Second, attack high-interest debt aggressively. Third, once that's cleared, redirect that same monthly payment, the one that used to go to a credit card, straight into retirement accounts. You won't even feel the difference in your monthly budget, because that money was already leaving your hands. You're just redirecting where it lands. Step 3. And this is the part I really want you to hear, because it's the one advantage the tax code hands specifically to people your age and older. Once you turn 50, the government allows you to contribute more to retirement accounts than younger workers are allowed to. These are called catch-up contributions. On a 401k, this means an extra chunk on top of the standard limit. On an IRA, it's a smaller but still meaningful extra amount. Think about what that actually means. The system, for once, isn't punishing you for starting later. It's building in a lane specifically for people who need to move faster in fewer years. That's not an accident. That's Congress acknowledging that people in their 50s often have their highest earning years. Their kids may be grown, or nearly grown, and they need a way to compress 20 years of saving into 10 or 15. If your employer offers a 401k with any kind of match, step 3.5 is this. Get every single dollar of that match before you do anything else optional with your money. That match is free money. Walking away from it is the closest thing to leaving cash on a table that exists in personal finance. Step 4. Automate all of it. Every single piece of this plan I just described should happen without you making a decision every single month. Set the contribution percentage once. Set it to increase automatically with each raise, if your plan allows it. The reason this matters isn't laziness. It's that willpower is a limited resource, and the fewer decisions your future self has to make correctly, the more likely this actually sticks for the next 10 years instead of the next 10 weeks. 12 months from now, if you do nothing else from this video except these 4 things, you will not be the person who avoided their statement out of shame. You'll be the person who has a number, a plan, and a habit already 6 months into motion. That's the whole plan. It's not exciting. It was never supposed to be exciting. It was supposed to work. And if you're wondering whether 12 months is really enough time to matter, it isn't about fixing everything in 12 months. It's about proving something to yourself in 12 months. That you can follow through. That the version of you who avoided the statement isn't the only version available. There's another one. Quieter. Steadier. Already a year further along than the person watching this video right now. Now, there's a question that always comes up around this point, and I want to answer it honestly instead of dodging it. If I'm behind, doesn't that mean I should take on more risk, not less? Shouldn't I be aggressive, since I have less time to make up ground? It's a fair question. And the answer is more nuanced than a simple yes or no. Here's the distinction that matters. There's a difference between being invested with intention and being invested with desperation. They can look identical from the outside. Both involve putting money into the stock market, but they come from completely different places, and they usually lead to completely different outcomes. Being invested with intention means you understand that stocks, over long periods, have historically outpaced more conservative options like savings accounts or bonds. So you keep a meaningful portion of your retirement money in a diversified mix of stocks. Not because you're trying to hit a lottery number, but because that's simply been the more effective long-term engine for growth. You're not betting on a single company, a single sector, a single hot trend. You're spreading that risk across hundreds or thousands of companies, and you're staying invested through the inevitable dips, because you understand dips are part of the process, not a sign you did something wrong. Being invested with desperation looks different. It's concentrated. It's often triggered by a specific headline or a specific tip. It's usually driven by an emotional need to make up for lost time immediately, rather than steadily. And it treats volatility not as something to tolerate on the way to a long-term goal, but as the goal itself, chasing the next big swing instead of building toward a number. The first approach can absolutely still involve a meaningful amount of stock exposure, even at 45 or 50. In fact, many financial professionals would tell you that being too conservative too early is its own kind of risk. Because if your money isn't growing fast enough, inflation quietly eats away at its purchasing power every single year you're not keeping pace. But here's where age does matter, and matters legitimately. As you get closer to actually needing this money, say within 5 to 10 years of when you plan to retire, it usually makes sense to gradually shift some of that money toward more stable ground. Not all of it. Not overnight. Gradually. This is sometimes called a glide path. And the logic behind it is simple. A serious market downturn the year before you retire can do damage that's very hard to recover from, because you no longer have decades to wait it out. The same downturn 10 years before retirement barely leaves a mark on your long-term outcome because time smooths it over. So the honest answer to, should I take more risk since I'm behind, is this. Don't confuse taking more risk with taking the right amount of risk for your actual timeline. A well-diversified, mostly stock-based portfolio in your 40s and early 50s isn't reckless. It's often appropriate. Betting heavily on one volatile asset because you feel like you need a miracle is a different thing entirely, and it's usually driven by fear, not strategy. I want to say one more thing here because I think it gets missed in most of these conversations. Risk isn't just about what's in your investment account. It's also about what's around your investment account. Do you have some kind of income protection if you got sick or hurt? Is there a will in place, even a simple one? Are you and your spouse, if you have one, actually on the same page about all of this? Or is one of you carrying this weight silently, while the other has no idea how close to the edge things really are? Wealth isn't only built by what you invest in, it's protected by the structure around it. A strong portfolio sitting next to an uninsured risk or an unspoken tension at home isn't as strong as it looks on paper. None of this needs to be perfect by next week. It needs to be honest, and it needs to move in the right direction, one piece at a time. Think about it like driving at night. You don't need your headlights to show you the entire road to your destination. You just need enough light to see the next 100 feet clearly. Then the next 100 feet after that. People get overwhelmed trying to see the whole 30-year road at once, and that's exactly when they either freeze completely or swerve hard because they panicked about something they saw way off in the distance that wasn't even close yet. You don't need the whole road lit up tonight. You need the next stretch. That's it. That's the entire skill. Somebody watching this right now is thinking about a specific account. A specific number they haven't looked at in months. I'm not going to tell you to go check it the second this video ends because that's not really the point. The point is smaller than that. And quieter. The point is just to stop treating it like something you're not allowed to look at. I want to tell you about someone. I'll call him Michael, because the details don't matter as much as the shape of the story, and this shape repeats more often than you'd think. Michael was 44, divorced a few years earlier, which had eaten into savings he thought were untouchable. 2 kids, one heading toward college faster than his bank account was ready for, and a retirement account that, if he's being honest, he hadn't looked at in almost 2 years. When he finally did look, the number was smaller than he expected. Not devastating, just smaller. The kind of number that makes your stomach drop. Not because it's catastrophic, but because it confirms a fear you'd been avoiding confirming. Here's what Michael didn't do. He didn't quit his job to chase some get-rich scheme. He didn't dump his savings into a single stock his cousin swore was about to blow up. He didn't spiral into believing the rest of his life was already decided. Here's what he actually did. And I want you to notice how unremarkable it sounds. Because that's exactly the point. He sat down on a Sunday afternoon and wrote down every account he had. He called his 401k provider and increased his contribution by 3%. Not a heroic number, just 3%. He paid off 1 credit card, the smallest one, within 4 months, using a method that's less about math and more about momentum. Then he took that same payment and redirected it toward the next card. A year later, his contribution had crept up again, this time because of a raise he mostly redirected instead of spending. 2 years later, he'd hit the age where catch-up contributions kicked in, and he used every dollar of that extra room. Was Michael a millionaire 5 years later? No. That's not the story, and I'm not going to lie to you and pretend it is. What actually happened is quieter than that, and honestly, more important. Michael stopped being afraid to open his statements. He knew his number. He had a plan attached to it. The shame that used to sit in his chest every time retirement came up in conversation with friends, that particular weight. It wasn't gone completely, but it had shrunk down to something manageable. That shrinking is the real transformation. Not a headline net worth. A relationship with money that stopped being defined by avoidance and started being defined by ownership. I bring up Michael because I think there's a trap hiding underneath all of this that we haven't talked about yet, and it's the comparison trap. You know the one. You're at a barbecue, and somebody mentions their financial advisor, or their vacation home, or their kid's fully funded college account, and something in you contracts. You start doing silent math about how far behind you must be compared to them. Here's what I need you to understand about that moment. You are comparing your actual known number to their imagined unknown one. You don't actually know what they have saved. You know what they've chosen to display. And displayed wealth and actual wealth are two entirely different things. Sometimes they overlap, and often, more often than people assume, they don't. Chasing a number that exists mostly in your imagination, based on what other people show you, is a guaranteed way to feel behind forever, regardless of what your actual account says. The only number that matters is the one connected to your actual life, your actual expenses, your actual timeline, not the curated version of somebody else's. Michael's story isn't extraordinary. That's exactly why I'm telling it to you. Extraordinary stories make people feel like the fix requires something extraordinary. It doesn't. It requires the unremarkable stuff. A Sunday afternoon, a phone call, 3%, one credit card at a time. There's a version of you, one Sunday from now, who has done the same thing Michael did. Written down every account, made one phone call. That version of you isn't a different person with different luck. It's the same person, just a few unremarkable decisions ahead of where you're sitting right now. The gap between where you are and where Michael ended up was never talent, or luck, or some head start he had that you don't. It was a Sunday afternoon he stopped avoiding. That's available to you too. It always was. I think about how much energy gets spent on the comparison instead of the correction. How many hours get burned resenting someone else's version of getting ahead, instead of spending 20 minutes on your own version of catching up? The barbecue conversation fades by Monday. The compound interest on the decision you make this weekend does not. And there's something else worth saying about Michael. He still had bad months after that Sunday. A car repair that ate into his emergency cushion. A month where the credit card crept back up because his daughter needed braces nobody had budgeted for. Progress was never a straight line, and I don't want you picturing one, because that fantasy sets people up to quit the first time reality interrupts them. What made the difference wasn't the absence of setbacks. It was that setbacks stopped being proof the whole plan was pointless. They became just another Tuesday to work through, instead of a reason to close the statement for another 2 years. Before I keep going, I want to ask you for something small. If you've stayed with me this far into the video, it tells me something. It tells me this isn't background noise for you. This is something you're actually thinking about. Maybe something you've been thinking about quietly for longer than you'd admit out loud. So if that's you, I'd genuinely appreciate it if you subscribe to this channel and stuck around with us. We put out videos like this regularly for people exactly in your position. Not the 25-year-old with 40 years to figure it out, but people who need real, honest, unglamorous financial conversations. That's what this channel is for. And here's something I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Not a number. I'm not asking anyone to publicly post their account balance. Please don't do that. I'm asking something different. I want to know, what's the moment that made you finally look at this? Was it a birthday? A conversation at a family dinner? A late night doing math you didn't want to be doing? Write it in the comments, even a sentence. I read them, and I promise you, whatever that moment was for you, someone else reading the comments will recognize themselves in it. All right, let's get back to where we were, because there's something I haven't told you yet. And it might be the most important part of this entire video. Everything I've walked you through so far, the mistakes, the plan, the risk conversation, Michael's story, all of it assumes one thing, that you'll actually start. And I want to be honest about the biggest obstacle standing between you and starting, because it isn't math. It was never math. It's the story you're telling yourself about who you are, financially. Some of you have been carrying a version of yourself in your head for years. The version who's bad with money. The version who always ends up behind. The version who watched a parent struggle with the same thing and quietly decided, somewhere without ever saying it out loud, that this was simply how it goes for people like you. I need you to hear this clearly. That story is not a fact. It's a pattern you inherited or built or absorbed from years of small moments. And patterns, unlike facts, can be interrupted. Here's what interrupting it actually looks like, practically speaking. It looks like opening one account today instead of tomorrow. It looks like calling your HR department and asking one question about your 401k match that you've been meaning to ask for 2 years. It looks like sitting down with a spouse or a partner and having one honest, uncomfortable, necessary conversation about where things actually stand, instead of both of you quietly assuming the other one has it handled. None of those actions require you to become a different person. They just require the current version of you to do one specific thing today that the story in your head says you're not capable of. And once you do it, once, even something small, the story starts to crack. Not because the crack fixes everything overnight, but because you now have proof, real, lived proof, that the story was wrong. And proof is a lot harder to argue with than fear is. This is the part of the video where most people expect me to tell you, it's simple. It's not simple. Changing a financial trajectory in your 40s or 50s, while raising kids, while paying a mortgage, while maybe supporting aging parents at the same time. That's genuinely hard. I'm not going to insult you by pretending otherwise. But hard and impossible are not the same word. And everything we've talked about today, the myth about compound interest, the 3 mistakes, the 12-month plan, catch-up contributions, the difference between intention and desperation, none of it requires impossible. It requires hard, done consistently, starting now. You've already done the hardest part just by staying here this long. You looked at something you've probably been avoiding. That's not nothing. That's the beginning. I want to leave you with one more thought before we close this out, because I think it matters more than any of the strategy we've covered. Every person who ever turned their financial life around after 40 had this exact moment. A video, a conversation, a bad night with a calculator, some ordinary trigger that made them stop looking away. They weren't smarter than you. They weren't luckier than you. They just let that moment actually change something. Instead of letting it pass like all the other moments before it did. Let this be that moment. Not because I'm telling you to, but because you're still here, 30-some minutes into a video about a number that used to embarrass you, and you didn't look away once. I want to add one more thing here, because I think it gets skipped too often in videos like this. Starting doesn't mean telling everyone in your life about it. You don't need to announce this to your siblings, or post about your financial journey, or turn this into a performance for anyone watching. Some of the most solid turnarounds I've ever seen happened quietly, known only to the person doing the work, and maybe one account statement at a time. You don't owe anyone an explanation for catching up. You just owe yourself the follow-through. So let's go back to where we started. To that number. $50,000, or maybe less, sitting in an account you almost didn't want to open tonight. Remember what I asked you at the very beginning. How much of that number is actually about money? And how much of it is about shame? I asked you to hold on to that answer. Here's what I think happens for most people who actually sit with that question honestly. The money part turns out to be smaller than it felt. Solvable even. A percentage here, a catch-up contribution there, a credit card paid off 1 month at a time. None of it complicated. All of it, frankly, a little boring. The shame part is the one that was never really about the number at all. It was about a story. A story that said, people like you don't figure this out. A story that said the window closed a long time ago, somewhere behind you. And all that's left now is managing the disappointment. I don't know what happened in your life that put you here. Maybe it was a divorce that split what you built in half. Maybe it was a business that didn't work, or a layoff at the worst possible time, or years spent taking care of someone else's needs before you ever got to your own. Maybe it was just drift, nothing dramatic, just years that passed while you were busy surviving them. Whatever it was, it doesn't get the final word. It got a word, not the final one. Think about Michael again, for a second. Not because his story was remarkable, because it wasn't. He didn't wake up one morning transformed. He just stopped letting the avoidance make his decisions for him. One Sunday, one phone call, one credit card. That's the whole secret, if you can even call it a secret. It was never hidden. It was just uncomfortable enough that most people would rather not look at it directly. You've looked at it directly for the better part of half an hour now. That already puts you somewhere different than where you started this video. I'm not going to tell you exactly what to feel right now. I don't know your specific number, or your specific mortgage, or what's sitting in your specific inbox waiting to be dealt with. But I know this: the version of you 60 seconds from now, closing this video, has a choice the version of you an hour ago didn't fully have. Because now you know the mountain changed shape. You know the 3 mistakes to watch for in yourself. You know there's a lane built into the tax code with your name on it. More or less. Once you turn 50, you know the difference between invested with intention and invested with desperation. None of that knowledge does anything by itself. Knowledge sitting still is just another form of the avoidance we talked about earlier. It only becomes something real the moment you do one small, unremarkable thing with it. So here's what I'm going to ask of you, and it's the last thing I'll ask in this video. If any part of tonight landed, if some sentence in here found the exact place you'd been avoiding looking, subscribe to this channel and share this video with 5 people who need to hear it as much as you did. Not because sharing helps some algorithm, because somewhere in your life, there's a friend, a sibling, a coworker, carrying the exact same silent number, the exact same silent shame, convinced they're the only one behind. They're not. You weren't either. leave a comment and be honest in it. Tell me the real number, if you're comfortable, or just tell me where you are in this. And tell me what you want the next video to dig into deeper. The catch-up contributions, the debt order, the conversation with a spouse who doesn't know how bad it's gotten. Whatever's sitting heaviest for you right now. The account balance you were embarrassed to open tonight is still exactly what it was an hour ago. But you're not. That's the part that actually matters. Somewhere down the road, 5 years, 10 years, whenever this all quiets down enough to look back, you'll remember tonight, not as the night your account balance changed. It didn't. Not yet. You'll remember it as the night you stopped looking away. Everyone gets one of those nights, if they let themselves have it. This one's yours. I'll be here.